All right. Good afternoon, LinkedIn. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. Super excited today to be joined by these three amazing change makers for a LinkedIn Live we've been really excited about for some time, that was crafted from the mind of my dear friend here, Amina, because nonprofit is changing fast, folks. And I feel like there is so many new things happening this year alone that we're all looking at. What does it mean to make impact? What does it mean to make impact globally? So if you're here joining us today, I'm sure these are questions in your mind. Maybe you're with a nonprofit that serves in many parts of the world, and that's part of what we're here to talk about today. So feel free to throw your name, where you're from in the comments. And we're going to kick it off first by having our lovely panelists introduce themselves. So, Adi, I'm going to have you go first, my friend. Let's hear a little bit about your work. Tell us a bit about yourself.
All right. So, hi everyone. My name is Ade Olowo, originally from Nigeria, but I live in the US now, Texas, College Station. Whoop, if there's any Aggies here. Uh, so, I work for an organization called the Christian Alliance for Orphans. I am the African regional coach. Essentially, what we do at Careful is to create, we call them networks. And essentially, the network is create a safe place for the government, non-profit organizations, faith-based, non-faith-based, policymakers, community leaders to come together and talk about the best practices for vulnerable kids, so orphans, widows in their community. So to see what's the best practices. So we talk about from preventing kids from entering the orphanage system in the first place, and then the kids who are in the orphanages, what resources are they offering? What do they have? What for staff? What do they have? And then also kids that are aging out of those orphanages every year, what resources do they have in their community to help them thrive? So my work centers around I was talking to those communities in Africa, but also talking with organizations here in the US and churches who partner with us just to help with cultural differences, working in cross-cultural world in Africa in the US. So sometimes I'm talking to helping two worlds, even though they speak the same English language, but might be different. You know what maybe the American is saying to the African is not understanding what the American is saying, or what the African is saying, the American is not understanding. So helping navigate those two worlds, trying to help people understand what's happening.
I love
So
that.
that's kind of my work.
True bridge builder, my friend. And as part of the nonprofit hive, frequently you've been my go-to with some questions regarding culture, as well as a welcome wagon for so many of our members from Africa who join. And you are the first person they often talk to, because I go, oh, here's someone who knows so much across so many different parts of Africa and can really speak to both experiences. So I love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Cameron, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work?
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much, Tasha. I'm excited to be here. My name is Cam Outlaw, full name Cameron. I live in Tampa, Florida, over in the U.S., and I serve as the Director of Global Partnerships at A Child's Hope Foundation. We exist to elevate the way the world cares for orphans and vulnerable children, recognizing that the desire is for every child to be raised in a loving family, but in our current society, that's not a reality for a lot of children. So at what points do we intervene to create opportunity for them to live successful lives of resilience and meaning? We do that in three main ways. We train, connect, and fund various initiatives around the world in this sector. Ideally, and one of the most prominent things that we're doing is we have a Thrive Collective, similar to our friend Ade and what he was mentioning about community. Our Thrive Collective is made of an amalgam of individuals, whether they're governments or NGOs or care providers, those individuals working directly with children to find best practices. I'm often leaning on Ade to help me understand some of the context and nuance inside of the African sector for orphan care. But we're recognizing there's a lot of isolation in this sector, and I bet that's tangible for a lot of people working in the broad umbrella of the NGO world. Like, is anybody else doing what I'm doing here?
Yeah.
And so part of what A Child's Hope is trying to do is eliminate isolation by connecting everybody in the sector to the support they need. And so I can share more on that later, but excited to be here and to learn alongside my friends.
It's fantastic. Love that. And Amina, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing?
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. I hope you can hear me because I'm in a Tim Hortons today. So let me raise my phone. I'm the founder and executive director of a Canadian charity called Cameras for Girls. And what we do is we provide skills-based training in photography, ethical storytelling, and vital business skills, plus a camera to keep, to young women who are trying to get into male-dominated media spaces. We recognize the gender-based barriers to employment, and we work around that. And that's why a camera is a starting point for what we do. But it opens up so much more in the work we do because we empower these women. I hate the word empower because it's steeped in our ethical storytelling framework. We empower these women to recognize the value within, build their confidence to use their voices, their skills to get these vital jobs. So I just returned literally 10 days ago from Uganda, where we had just done 4 separate workshops for 60 women, 4-day workshops, which is the beginning of our year-long program. And we are looking forward to empowering these new cohorts to bringing out their skills in all of these different ways while building vital partnerships on the continent to help us grow.
Amazing. Love it. It's fantastic. This is such a great panel. I feel like you guys have so much to bring to this conversation. And, I know our nonprofit Hive Network has been so diverse in people all over the world and many missions, even if the founder, like Amina, is currently living in Canada, they are serving very internationally, which is part of why I'm sure inspired Amina to suggest this as one of our topics for this year. So members of the audience who are listening in, please feel free to comment. We are going to take questions in real time if you have any questions for our panelists. So please jump in there. We want to hear your experience too. And without further ado, we're going to jump right into this. Super excited. And this is going to be posted first to Amina. But the idea here was, cross-border partnerships, they're common in the nonprofit world and they sound great. And then there's this power dynamics that often come into play, as we move along. So as a nonprofit, how can we ensure that those partnerships become as equitable as possible, where those local communities are really leading versus that donor-driven agenda? What does that look like?
I love this question. We are very cognizant of the fact that we are a Canadian organization working in Africa. And having come from a background of living in Africa under colonial times, our family came as refugees to Canada from Uganda under Idi Amin's war. I did not want to go back where I started this initiative, being in that, and I'll just say it, very NGO mindset of, you want our help, you need to do this, this, and this. You need to fit the boxes. Instead, right from the beginning, we've asked, what is it that you need to succeed so that we can build our programming around that framework, which is where true sustainability truly comes from. But equity is so vitally important. So in order to get to these 60, the last cohort of these 60 women, I recognize that, number one, I can't do this alone. I can't live in a silo and think that, hey, I'm an organization, we've got the power, we're going to do this. No, I had to start by going back to the basics of, are we actually meeting the needs of these women? Yes? Okay. How are we actually going to grow? We're going to now start a train the trainer program. So we launched that first last year. We took 5 former students, trained them to become me, essentially. Because I can't do it. I can't be everywhere and everything to everybody. That is, number one, not sustainable. Number 2, it empowers them to step into who they truly are meant to be. And it came to fruition with these 60 women and 4 cohorts where they led and I was their assistant. And it really was like the most incredible moment to stand back and think, I put this on paper a year ago, and here we are actually doing it. But that doesn't come without those vital discussions of, is this needed? Why is this needed? How are we going to make this work by making it a partnership by all, and sustainability, keeping that at the center part. But then when we look at partnerships outside of what we are building within, that becomes also another question. Who are we partnering and with, and why? Are they going to meet the mission and vision and drive it forward, or are we doing mission drift just to say, oh, we got this partner? And does it meet their needs as well to partner with us? So because our name is growing, we're getting a lot of attention, and a lot of African organizations coming to us and saying, hey, can you partner with us? Bring your photography training to us, bring your cameras, da da da. We have to stick to our mission. And in order to meet their needs, though, we built this online learning hub during COVID, never recognizing that that online learning hub was now going to be a conduit for thousands of girls across Africa to be able to learn with their own tools. And so it becomes that, furthering of our mission outside of our small box to, okay, how are these partners branching off and meeting their needs as well? So hopefully that answers the question.
No, I love it. I love it. It's beautiful. And I do love that, trying to figure that out at the nonprofit hive myself right now. How do I empower others to lead? Because it never should be a solo voice for something as big as this, right? Community led, it needs support along the way, but I love how smoothly you made that sound. I know there's a lot of work behind that.
Yeah.
So much work, right? Adi, what does community-led mean to you in your work, and how are you enabling and supporting that agenda? Oh, you're still muted, my friend. I'm going to unmute you.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. So so for us at Careful, we're very intentional because I said we create these networks. Number one, we say this is not a Careful network. It's their network. And so you will never hear of Careful Nigeria, Careful Kenya, Careful Malawi, Careful. You will never hear that, because that's not that. They're not even allowed to use our name, because they were like, oh, it's Careful. We should just call it Careful Malawi. Like, no, you can't, because it's your network. So they come up with their own name. They register with the government, like this. So we try to say, this is your network, right? I'm working for you, because you have the power to fire me. If today, this morning, you wake up in the morning and say, hey, we don't like partnering with Careful anymore, it's okay, or like, it's fine. Thank you. So, so that's for us, because we really want to empower the locals. And so I think it's very important we understand that, because we tell them, hey, it's your network. You can partner with different people you want to partner with. Because the government is going to call on you, then they're going to call on us, right? We are just there to serve as a bridge builder to help you with some of those resources. So for us, we really strongly, and I know sometimes in Africa, it's very hard for Africans to understand that. It takes a lot of time to really help them understand. I know this is your network. You have the power. This is you are the ones living in those communities, working with those children. You see the problems. You are the ones who will talk to the government, the churches, the organizations to collaborate together. So I think it's very important that we establish that, even when we are creating these new networks with our people. So for us, it's key that we establish that, to say, hey, this is your network. It's even more important that, because CAFO is a very big organization. We have partners in the US. We have an annual summit in the US. We have people. We have a summit that we do. People want to bring their African guys to the summit every year, and they want us to give them invitation letters. Well, we tell them, you have to go through our networks, and our network leaders have the power to tell us, hey, don't bring these people to the US. This organization are not. So it's like, some organizations, even careful members get upset, but we say, look, these guys, we trust these guys. They are the ones who are working, forming this collaboration. We cannot just invite you. You have to go through these networks, and if they say no, we obey them. So that's kind of how we ensure this partnership is really equitable, where there's that direct collaboration with our network leaders.
I love that. And there's two things there. There's the language, which is so intentional, right? And I think that's really important, particularly when we're talking about culture and different ways, of different potentially language barriers. Just how we say things can be very different. I love the intentionality around the language there, and that it really feels like a decentralized power model in what you're talking about, because you're making sure to bring those leaders up to that level. Cam, how is a Child's Hope Network moving kind of away from just following along with donor-driven agendas and really making sure to empower the people you work with?
Yeah, that's so good. And I'm proud of the foundation I work for, because we're learning and we're evolving as we go forward, recognizing that the need of the hour on a global scale for orphan care is child care reform. There are national care strategies that are recognizing orphanages aren't the only place for children to be, that family-based care, community-based care is a very viable opportunity for vulnerable children. And so how do we move forward in that direction? Not just like put our foot to the metal, meaning like to go faster in the direction of like, well, clearly this is what we're going to do, but recognizing that all those stakeholders require nuanced approaches. And something that was evidenced in all of my friends here sharing, it's like conversation. How do you just have the conversation? It is so much a heart posture and a mindset around partnership. And even your question, Tasha, is powerful for ensuring partnerships are truly equitable. Do you, as an NGO, see yourself as a partner to the local organization, rather than being like, these are the people who will do my program? And that's not true. Or it could be true, but there's a better way. A final thought, just to answer your question, Dr. Lupton wrote a powerful book called Toxic Charity. I'm sure some of you have heard or read it before. There was a quote in there that stuck with me that says, never do for someone else what they can or what they could learn to do for themselves or can do for themselves. And I love Amina's approach. Those individuals don't know how to use cameras to that level yet, but she's empowering them to do so. And so she's able to step out of the way eventually. She's training them so that they can continue to run their own business or however it may be. And that's in regards to Child's Hope. We're looking to do that. How can our products and our services go to empower these directors of children's homes, these caregivers, these government agents to act autonomously, but interdependently among the sector?
Yeah. Well, I think in some ways, what you all are describing to me sounds like the only way to truly scale at some point is to give that, power back, right? So like, how do you ever hold it all? And should we ever be holding too much power, right? And how do you give that back? So I love that, Cam. What a great just descriptor how you put that together. It's beautiful. And I'm actually going to throw the next one right back at you, because you're on a roll here with, what are some of these real world examples of what can potentially make or break a program with these cultural differences that may exist? And how, do you have any examples that you know of that have led to success, or things that maybe are cautionary tales to go, actually, this is really hard to pull off and this didn't work quite the way we wanted it to?
Yeah, I'll start with a proverb from the African continent. I'm not sure who necessarily claims it, but if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And as a primer for this, adapting to cultural differences is a slow process. Two stories, one of success, one of failure. I'll start with the failure. I was trying to engage with an agency working in a Middle Eastern country, and there's a lot about that context that I don't know. I was assuming that collaboration to me would look the same as for them on their side of the pond. That was not true. And so as I was trying to collaborate with multiple agencies, they actually felt slighted or shamed or dishonored when I was doing that because of a certain status in society at which this group was different than this other group. And I was like, oh no, I did not understand this cultural difference. And we aren't working in that country largely because it didn't move forward and I was hamstrung. And it's unfortunate. I do trust that it's timing. Eventually, if the Lord wills, we will move into that country with some of our products and services. But an example of a success of adapting to cultural differences is more a mindset that we've adapted for some of our tools. When working on the ground in Uganda or Kenya or Zambia, just for example, we offer a certain tool, which is the Thrive assessment. This assessment allows a director of a children's home, sometimes called orphanage, to think through how are we upholding the rights of the child and making sure that they're getting quality care in this children's facility, and at the same time doing everything we can to place them into community care or back with families. We have a template for that tool, but every country that in which we're in, it looks different because we ask our on the ground partners, can you look at all these questions? There's a lot of them. Look at all these questions. Do any of these not fit your context?
Mhm.
Can I say this more Zambian, or can I say this more Kenyan for you? Or do we just need to pitch that question entirely? And so it's very much a workshop that we're creating ahead of time before intervention even happens to be like, does this feel right? Did you make this assessment with us? And so that's how we're adapting.
That's amazing. And I think so often in nonprofit, in an effort to serve more, we forget that we may not be serving well a particular group by trying to make a one size fits all. I don't think often it doesn't work, even when we try it in a condensed cultural context. It still doesn't work all that well. But when we're talking about many different cultural contexts, I love that, Cam. That's fantastic. Like, I hope, I want to actually know more, because I think that's beautiful. I don't know if anybody in the comments is doing something similar. I'd love to hear more about it from people. Amina, similarly, real world examples like that cultural success versus maybe not successes.
Yeah. Well, we work in Uganda and Tanzania right now, right? And so when making assumptions that are broad based, thinking that every country is like every other country is a failure, right? So that comes from two things. You have to have those discussions, and you have to be curious to ask the right questions. So when I started in Uganda, we've been doing this since 2018 in Uganda, only expanded in 2023 in November. And so I wouldn't say it's a failure, but maybe I didn't ask the right questions at the time to assume that the culture was the same, because they're neighboring countries. So there's in Dar es Salaam, there's more Muslim women in my cohorts than in Uganda. And so the training has to be slightly modified to fit that context. And the understanding of what the output is going to be in terms of job placement, or where they're going to work, or how they're going to work. Even the challenges they have from culture, from patriarchal societies, from home, about what their fathers will or will not allow. All of these things were, came full front on us when we went to Tanzania, right? And I assumed it would be the same, and it wasn't. And we had to modify that training to fit that context, and it's working once we do that. But that taught me that, okay, now that we're going to Kenya next year, or we're going to South Africa in 2 years, how do we modify it again to fit that context? So having those vital conversations, not only with the university partners, but the students themselves, and learning from them. So a failure that turned into a success. But even when we teach in our workshops, in our 4-day workshops, we talk about mental health and sexual harassment. How we talk about it in Uganda is very different from how we talk about it in Tanzania. And to give you an example, we did this workshop. So 2 years ago, when we started in Tanzania, we had a workshop, and it was taught by one of the professors. When we do it in Uganda, we bring an outside person because they're not affiliated with the university. In University of Dar es Salaam, they've got somebody who's teaching this. But even though she's teaching it, the girls still had this mindset that, oh, we can't say anything. So when we were talking about sexual harassment, how to advocate it, how to talk against it, how da, one of the girls said, and I said, yes. And she goes, we can't talk about this in our culture. We can't talk about this outside. And I said, who told you that you can't stand up for yourself when you are being sexually harassed? Who told you not to speak up against this? Because when you are not getting the confidence to speak up against this, you are not speaking up for yourself or your sisters. Not even 2 weeks later, this same girl was on a bus. She was accosted by the bus driver, and I'm going to cry, but because it's just so hard for me to be here and not have any control. But this is the power of what this program did. She was accosted by the bus driver and a passenger. She got off the bus. She did not go home. She went straight to the police station, remembering what we taught her. She filed a report. That bus driver got fired. The passenger got charged, and she won a settlement. And she wrote to me to say, because of what you taught me, I was able to stand up for myself and remember that I do have the power within to stand up for my rights. And so when we did this, we had 4 workshops in Uganda, 4 4-day workshops. 4 times our sexual harassment and mental health expert came and talked. And it was incredible to see these women speak up and speak up for each other and teach each other. No, you can't be silent, because if you're silent, it's just going to continue. And one of the girls said, you know what? Amina, what do you do? And I'm like, this happened to me in film. I said, well, I would turn around to the person and say, would you do this to your mother, your sister, or your daughter? Then why the hell are you doing it to me? And they were like, oh, I like that. I'm going to use that. So workshopping it. But to see them go from, I can't talk about this, to, ooh, I'm talking about it. But again, it's that cultural difference. How do we talk about something so mired in shame in these countries in an open way that's culturally appropriate at the same time? And you have to straddle that so carefully.
Carefully.
And I'll share one more brief example. We had in our one cohort 2 Muslim girls and 13 that were from, various backgrounds. It's primarily Catholic or Christian in Uganda. And she said, I'd like to start the training by saying a prayer. And I said, I'm sorry, but that's not accepted because we are non-denominational on purpose, because there's 54 different languages, 54 different tribes, so many different religions, and it has to be fair for everybody. And we are not faith-based. We are, everybody's involved, everybody's invited. And I said, if we start saying one, then we have to say the other, and that's not what we're here for, right? So she got a little bit upset, and so I had to take her aside and explain it to her after, because when we did our first training in 2018 and we didn't set the boundary, some of the girls wouldn't talk to the other girls because they came from different cultures, different backgrounds. And that's not what we're there for. We're there to build a sisterhood in a very male-dominated society of how do I succeed in life, not just as a photographer, journalist, communicator. How do I succeed as a woman in a male-dominated patriarchal society? And if we're starting to divide and conquer from the beginning, how do we succeed in the end? Together.
Yeah, that divisiveness for sure is huge, right?
Yeah.
So, oh my goodness, powerful stories. Thank you so much for sharing, Amina. Adi, what would you add to this? The cultural differences, and have you have some great examples in your work?
Yeah, I mean, those are great examples. Yeah, man, I think, cultural assumption, right, it's very important. I mean, you know, just me coming to the US, right, I think people, people think about Africa because I'm from Africa, people usually think about those kids with big stomach and eye and stuff like that. That's sometimes that's the assumption. So, quick story. I remember being in the US because my wife is from the US. We met in Nigeria, and so I was meeting some of our family friends. Just days before our wedding. And this lady comes up and she was talking to my wife, and I was standing there, and she asked the question. She asked my wife, like, "Hey, does he speak English?" And my wife was like, "Yes, he speaks English." She was kind of like taken aback, like, "Whoa, okay." She was like, "Oh, people in Africa speak English." And my wife was like, "Yeah." I mean, she turned to me. She was like, "Oh, he even went to college," and she was like, "Wait, people in these colleges in Africa?" Like, I was like, "Yes, there's colleges in Africa, right?" So, I say this story is because there's just so many people have different assumptions culturally of international different countries. So I think we need to kind of start there. If you want to do international work, you need to understand when you go visit, talk to the people, you need to understand what are their needs, how they do things. So an example is, I was talking to an organization that had a big donor who was upset because people in Kenya were farming with their cores, with their hands, right? And he went to visit and he wanted to buy them a tractor. And they said, "No, thank you so much. We don't need a tractor." Right? And he was upset, like, "Hey, I want to the tractor is going to help them grow faster." So when I talked to the organizations, like, what happened, they were like, "Well, if he buys us a tractor, if the tractor gets broken, well, how are we going to fix it? We don't have the parts. We don't even know how to ride this tractor." What we ask him is, "Hey, if he can, with that money, to send our kids to school, if he builds more school, more classroom, so that our kids can go to school, I think that would be useful for us." They were like, "We don't want him to waste his money buying this tractor, and when he leaves, nobody's going to use it." So, I had to talk to the guy, like, "Look, this is the situation. They're not saying no to your tractor, like, but they don't have a means of fixing this tractor. So I've seen more and more stuff like that happening where people with good intentions go in, build a whole system of fishing that works like in the US, but it cannot work in Africa. And they don't really ask the people. And the people in Africa don't want to quench their spirit because they saw how excited these guys are coming to build. They don't want to tell them, like, "Yeah, this might not work." So sometimes I have to tell my African brothers, like, "You have to, you know, tell these people because they've invested coming, funding and everything. If they do this project and they are back here and they're all excited that, oh, we have done this great project here, but 2 months, everything is all broken down. And it's not serving you, it's not serving anybody." So I think, yeah, we have to find ways of talking and listening to both sides of, like, okay, if I do this project, is it gonna work, or what other system do you have I can just enhance what you guys are doing. So I think that's very important and key. So even in our work, we try to really help organizations understand what's really happening. And yeah, so I think that's kind of ways to help. Really, you have to go in, understand the cultures, listen to them, figure out what works for them, and then enhance it. Even if you have something new, you have to ask them, will this work when I leave? How are you going to continue with this with it? So
there's a great question that came in here, Cam, when you were speaking, and I wasn't able to pull it in naturally, but this was really directed towards you when you were talking earlier in this conversation, and particularly. But are you finding funders, and this applies to all three of you, but are you finding funders giving you the space and time to build this level of thoughtful partnership? Do you know what I mean? Like when we talked about earlier, this assessment form and how it's different for each group. Like, how do funders feel about this level of closeness too?
I don't think they're at that level yet because they may be not from the global south, have not done their own research as to the challenges, right? Like Ade mentioned earlier, we see Africa as this place where everybody is poor, the children bloated, they're looking at it through a a lens that where the stories have been told the same way for millennia, for generations. And now through my work in ethical storytelling, aside from Cameras for Girls, I'm trying to break those stereotypes. And then through the grant writing, through the proposals, make them understand what they're actually funding, how much change they can actually impact. It's not like, working in a silo. It grows so much further than that. Because if we look at where Cameras for Girls is, yes, we give a girl a camera. Yes, we help her get a job. Yes, we did. But when she gets money, she's funding 5 family members. So all of a sudden, that impact goes even further. So if you're looking at a cohort of 15, right, and they're each funding 5 family members on average, look at what that funder is actually impacting.
Yeah.
But they don't take the time to understand because they're just looking at their small, oh, we're going to fund this, right? But they're not looking at this. And they need to start looking at this to realize the impact those dollars can actually make. And now, especially leaving behind, the gap that's been created by USAID, those funders are more essential than ever to actually create the impact that is needed on the continent. But then also empowering these communities to do it for themselves as well. Because the solution to Africa is in Africa. It's not coming from the outside.
Absolutely. Cam, would you
Yeah.
have something to add to that in terms of thoughtful partnerships?
Yeah, I would say that I agree with Amina that it is rarer to find funders who are willing to support something that is straight up connection funding. A lot historically, funders love to build buildings to do these initiatives that perhaps served a time and place, but that time and place is no longer the present in most cases, where we're looking for investment in community. We're looking investment in collaboration. We're looking for people who will go the distance with us. What I've found to be successful in the fundraising realm, because that's half of my job, is telling the story, demonstrating how our projects are, our products and services, they run because of collaborative partnerships, and that we are taking direct information from our partners on the ground of like, this is the project and this is what it results in. We are not going to do it differently because we're not the ones actually doing it. We're helping they're using our products and services, but it's them who are the on the ground agents who are doing that work. I've found that changing the narrative, and I mean, I love how you talk about narrative. It's powerful. What is the story we're telling at a Child's Hope Foundation, and how is it honoring the dignity that's inherent of all people and not playing into something that might be subconscious or subliminal of like, oh, they need my help. I don't know if that's what we need. But finding ways to empower. I have found recently a wonderful friend who has now become a donor for us and is like, we love what you're doing because it's focused on connection and community. A final thought is going after grants together with other agencies to demonstrate, no, we believe in the value of partnership, and that's how we're going to fund XYZ project that leads to this long-term impact.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. These weren't even this is like an extra question thrown in here. Addie, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think also, sometimes, because in our work, right, we are trying to move from orphanages to family-based care, right? And so sometimes the challenges we are finding is like, when an organization, an orphanage in Africa is trying to really move to family-based care, sometimes the problem is if it has a funder from the US, the funders don't understand what family-based care looks like because there's already spent so much investment in the building and everything. So we have to then come back and talk to the founder too, to say, hey, this is why, just like I mean, this is why we're moving to family-based care, because you have to think about the child in focus. Like if, I tell a founder in the US, like if you died today and you and your wife had an accident today, will you want your children to live in an orphanage, or will you want them to go live with your brother? With your brother, they were like, oh, I want my kids to live in with my brother. And also, here this people have wills, so your family will be taken care of. So that's what we're trying to do, to say, hey, you know what? There's a widow who just lost her husband. She has 3 kids. The best option is to send 2 of my kids to the orphanages, But if we invest in the widow and create a business for her, she can keep her kids. But also, as we talk to the fund in the US, we also have to talk to the community, right? So with our networks, it has to be 50-50. Because the problem is, if, like I said, if all the fund is coming from the US and we're not teaching the people in Africa to fund, what does fundraising look like in Africa? It might not be the same way in the US, but there's people in that community that want to help, But sometimes the problem is when the community says, "Oh, there's all these ministers, these people are coming first funding this stuff, we don't have to fund it." So I think there has to be that mutual understanding of how does the local funding looks like from both area. A quick example for us is when we have our we have a called Collaborate Plus. There's an event that every network hosts. In the past, we just sent funding, but then with 5 years when I came in, I had to change that. Yeah, I'd say, okay, careful, this is what we're gonna do. Let's make it a matching grant. So it's helping our local networks. Whatever you raise, we're gonna match it. And when I said that, my people in Africa, I thought you were gonna kill me. But I had to explain to them, I had to teach them how to fundraise. But the cool thing is that when they understood and they did it, we have one of our network leaders in Sierra Leone who went and met a business guy who runs the internet and says, "Hey, look, I'm planning a program. I'm going to need some internet. Can you give me half of the cost?" And the guy was like, "What program are you running?" And when he explained to him, the guy was like, I'm gonna give you free internet for your 2 days for your whole program because you're doing a great work. Why haven't you tell me about what you guys are doing?" Right? So and so is helping them to realize, okay, we can even talk to business people in our country who even help kids, help families. So I think it's very important that when we do that, we work even with locally and international too. So
I love how naturally this conversation has flowed because you guys jumped right into the next two questions without me really prompting them because we had a whole ethical storytelling bend and all of this. And we only have 45 minutes and I try to stick to this because I love that you guys came and did this with me so much. So we're going to kind of jump and it's kind of fitting into the last question, but we're going to jump because I know everybody, thank you so much. The comments section, lovely. People have been amazing. But I want to end on this note, and Addie, we're going to go right to you first, but this is so relevant, and I understand this is going to be so hard to keep it short and sweet. So if I'm going to go it like this, there's these international projects, there's all this external funding that we're getting. Leadership is sometimes external to the country that is being supported, or often is. Local communities feel dependent rather than empowered instead of empowered. We're going to start using empowered. I really like that a lot, Amina. But, what are the best strategies or what is something you've seen that really works? And Addie, you already just gave a couple amazing in real life examples, but, would there be something for those people who are listening today that you would go start thinking about this? I would recommend this as part of your strategy. And I'll get each of you guys to give me thing you think really makes a difference.
Yeah, like I said, 50-50% partnership, right? I've had people in the US say, "Hey, I'm the executive director. My job here is to raise funds in the US, and the people in Africa is to work." I will say, "Can you please change that notion and say how 50-50? How can you teach to people in Africa to raise funds locally as you raise funds, and so that once you pull out, it will affect their work." We saw what's happening with US aid. We saw what's happening.
Yes.
Create a system in those countries that will generate some funding, so that they will all depend on you. So that even you can even create exit strategy. I'm going to do this for 10 years, and in 10 years, we want them to be sustainable, so that we can fund other projects. So you have to make sure you have a 50-50 partnership of even local fundraising, where there's something sustainable for these organizations. If not, we'll just still continue doing this. Oh, you guys with the US, there's all these poor African countries don't have funding in their own country. So let's change that perspective. So that's what I would say.
I love that. Fantastic advice. Amina, what would you add? What's your strategy?
So I think I mentioned it already in the savings of time, but what we did last year to build this sustainability is start with our Train the Trainer program, right? Asking the vital questions of our constituent, forget it, our students.
Love it.
I'm dry in the mouth, whatever. And really understanding what is it that you need and what do we deliver? How do we build our programming around that need? Not to, hey, here's cameras for girls. This is what we're doing. Take it or leave it. That's not a workable model. You have to be constantly going back and saying, is it still meeting your needs? No, what's not meeting your needs? Next year we look at adding or taking away, right? And it's constantly around the community that we are working with needs. That's the only way to truly build that sustainability, which then leads to job creation, which is what our next stage is. Working with a major funder, which we're pitched, has been, green-lit. Now we're doing proposal stage. When we put those women to work, not in Ugandan shillings, in US dollars, remember the 5 people that I mentioned that each people usually serves well or supports? Imagine the exponential effect of that US dollar payment rather than local payment, which doesn't even cover their daily needs. So constantly looking at needs assessment, figuring out what is it, how can we meet it with our limited resources, and unfortunately me still being at the helm, hopefully one day having a team, but always keeping mission and vision at my North Star.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
And making sure what we're doing is actually making an impact.
I love that. And I think, one thing that you've all kind of highlighted, and it maybe hasn't been directly said, is there's some deep listening going on here, right? It really needs to be deep. And that sometimes is not great for scale, right? Because you actually have to take the time, have the conversation. Maybe you've got a cup of coffee and you have to small talk for 10 minutes. But after 10 minutes, you get to that meat of like something really great, right?
I'll just add one more thing if I can.
Sure.
I think sometimes you have to step back to go forward. You cannot keep on just, grinding. Oh, we got to get this program. Because you're not going anywhere. So I'm actually in that reflective stage after having come back from Uganda, where we were hugely successful, to say, do I pause the rest of the year so that I can go further next year? And that's part of your sustainability plan.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Cam, what would you add? What's the strategy? What's the thing you would say to our listeners as we kind of close this up today?
In short, I would challenge any leader from an NGO or any person on NGO to understand what is their culture of critical conversations. These critical conversations hit each of these 3 in the question: sustainability, job creation, local ownership. How often is there a rhythm of those conversations taking place? As the leaders, it's your job to make that happen. I do some consulting for culture coaching for nonprofits, and that's one of the big pieces that I'm asking questions. What are your qualitative and quantitative methods for assessing the culture of your organization? Think through that. Talk to your board, talk to your partner, talk to your friends, get that lined up so that you can make the biggest impact you can.
Oh my goodness. You guys are absolutely fantastic. Thank you for everyone who joined us today. I know we're already a few minutes over. It was impossible to get through all of the goodness we wanted to talk about today. And, these 3 amazing humans, I've met them over time through the nonprofit hive, through other conversations. You should all be going and following along with their journey. They have been instrumental, honestly, in people that I go and ask questions of and get some feedback in this particular space. So thank you all today. You've been just phenomenal. I am so excited by this conversation, and I just think it's so important, something we all need to be talking about. So thank you deeply. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the audience. Such a great group. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.